So imagine that you get pocket jacks in the small blind, the button opens, you 3-bet, they call, you flop a beautiful overpair, and you're wondering to yourself, wow, what was all the fuss about how pocket jacks is such a difficult hand to play? You c-bet, the button calls, womp womp, the turn's an ace. What are you gonna do? You know, this is not a nightmare. This is actually today's episode of Tactical Tuesday. So sit back, subscribe, and enjoy the show. All right, well, today's episode of Tactical Tuesday ought to be the easiest one of all time, where, you know, we're playing pocket jacks and we face a turn ace after flopping an overpair. I mean, this is like the quintessential slam dunk, easy spot to navigate, right, John?
I knew this was going to be tough as soon as I showed up and saw the jacks in the small blind. So, I mean, I didn't even need all the other complexity to start dreading this episode. But let's kick it off. Let's see what happens. I assume we start out with a 3-bet somewhere.
I hope so. So these are hands, you know, submitted by the Wolves. So hope the Wolves are 3-betting jacks. They do. We have a open from the hijack to $6 and the small blind, us, 3-bets jacks to $24, and the hijack makes the call. So we have a flop of 10-7 tray. There's also like a extra little quirk in this, but looks like we're starting about 200 big blinds deep. So we do have some depth compared to usual here. Can't really say anything about villain, have no data points other than, you know, the fact that they open 3x. So don't really know if they're, you know, reg or white belt, but we're 200 big blinds deep. Flop is 10-7-3 with a 10-3 of hearts. We have jack of hearts, jack of spades. Starting with a flop, what do you think here?
I guess I'll just talk about what my personal strategy would be in these nodes. Flopping an overpair on a 10-high board. Think just 10-high boards in general, or especially 10-high two-tone boards. I'm going to be playing probably some bigger bets, some bigger C bets, and also playing some checks. I think given that strategy, pocket jacks just very simply would fall into a big value bet. So I'd bet something along the lines of 2/3 or 3/4 pot on the flop. Yeah, that's how I would start with jacks.
Cool. Yep, I'm down. The Wolf does not start out with half or 3/4. They start out with a third, which I agree with you that I would certainly be using a bigger size on 10-7-3 2 hearts.
That I just want to like be clear that we're just because the Wolf isn't doing what I would do. I'm not like bashing this strategy at all. I think that there is a very, very strong strategy that you could have that starts out with 1/3 pot on the flop. In fact, like back when I was playing 200 and all myself, like my flop c-bet size on this board texture would have been a 1/3 pot with my entire range. I think especially if you're kind of, as this Wolf is playing like 200 NL, I think if you're sort of on the lower stake side of or end of the spectrum, something that can be really beneficial is just having a simple, easy to execute strategy that you can repeat over and over again, and like not having to split sizes or split your range into a betting range and a checking range, and just simply betting your entire range for a third is, I think one of the simplest ways to make sure that you have a strategy that you can remember and execute.
Yeah, I would say that this Wolf is terrible. I don't know what they're thinking, and they really need to question their life choices. No, I'm with you that you can get away with betting it there. It's not the end of the world. The in-position player does call. Turn, as promised, is the one that we're probably not really enjoying. The ace of diamonds. Kind of interestingly, the fact that the Wolf bet a third here could mean that they have more ace-x in their range on the turn ace rather than when they start out with 50 or 75. And so like this situation, starting out with a third on the flop isn't necessarily the end of the world on this specific card. Like there are some benefits here where, maybe they are like betting, more hands than they should, or like something like 75% or 60% of their range, and they have like ace king, ace queen, ace jack, all the back doors, as well as like maybe some offsuit combos that they're c-betting as well. So yeah, I would say that not the worst card when they bet a third, but would
Can
still
I
be... Yeah. Go ahead.
let me try like structuring the question this way. So like let's say in this world where our strategy on the flop is to range bet a third, um, what would I guess like what would your turn strategy be given let's say you're constrained to playing that strategy on the flop?
My turn strategy on this card
Yep.
specifically.
Yep.
Um, checking. I would check probably range.
Okay. Why would you check range instead of
Because while I have a bunch
split?
of
Yeah.
while I have like a bunch of single paired hands, I find that splitting would just, while we have the ace X in our range, like the villain certainly has all the ace X in their range too. Like they're never folding any ace X to a third, which is like, that's the downside of betting a third is that villain maintains all of their ace X in their range. When we start with 75%, they're going to shed some of their like, ace jack offs, ace queen offs, some of those types of hands. So, even like ace five of clubs may peel for a third, given that, they have like a bunch of backdoors and things of that nature. So, yeah, like while we have ace X, they have a lot of ace X too. And generally when, I think the value is pretty split, I tend to play pretty passively and would check. And if the turn checks through, then I'm probably going to be placing a pretty chunky value bet with like ace king, ace queen, ace jack. And if villain bets big and I have like ace king, ace queen, ace jack, then I'm just going to call. And I like maintaining some value in my range. Plus, if I'm betting range too, I also have a lot of hands that like really benefit from playing for no money, like king queen, queen jack, king jack, maybe like 8-9 suited if we have 8-9 suited, heart type hands, 4-5 suited that we may 3-bet as like a double gut shot. So like, yeah, I have a lot of hands that like are totally cool with like realizing their equity when the turn checks through. But I think in general at 200 big blinds, I tend to play fairly defensively.
Good. Yeah, I like that too. Yeah, and that's funnily enough, I'll just kind of harken back to like one of our old one-on-one coaching sessions back, and when I used to see bet a third on the flop with my entire range. This is actually the exact strategy that you sort of recommended that I go with on the turn on turnover cards is just or turn aces was just checking my entire range, keeping my checking range protected. I guess like the only thing that I'll add to what you said was that like found myself playing quite a few check raises on the turn because when you check your range, you naturally have hands that want to play for lots more money when villain decides to put in a bet a hand like a set of tens or ace 10 or ace 3 suited. And I actually found that strategy pretty easy to balance out, right? Because I'm also checking hands like some pretty strong combo draws on the turn, like queen jack of hearts, king jack of hearts, king queen of hearts. Just very, very natural check raise bluffs that are easy to find and easy to balance out the value that I want to check raise. So back when I was playing the range 1/3 flop strategy, I actually found the range check on the turn to be a really, really just protected strat that was easy to manage as well.
Nice. So at least I'm consistent. The wolf in question decided to bet a third, which now I think we can say pretty bad, not great. I was joking earlier on their flop strat, but this turn bet is just not good. So sorry, Wolf, who played this hand and submitted it for some vicious feedback, but yeah, pretty not good. Interestingly, the in position villain decides to raise. So kind of the irony here is that, I imagine that the wolf folds. So the wolf actually only invested like a third pot on the turn and got raised and folded. So they didn't lose a ton. But yeah, I think betting the turn is pretty ambitious. They're even blocking, they have the jack of hearts. So they're even blocking hands like flush draws that they could bet for value against. So yeah, this is like this is a punt. Sorry, Wolf. Not so good.
Yeah, not a huge fan of of betting the turn either.
But that said, though, some good stuff in the first one. Now let's go to look at this. We got pocket jacks again. Woohoo! another easy spot. Cutoff opens to $5. Again, we're playing 200 L. Man, this one we got like 110 big blinds deep, but not as deep as before. So pretty normal spot. Wolf 3-bets to $22. Cutoff calls. Flop is 8 for deuce. Rainbow. There's $45 in the pot. I think, once again, John, what's your preferred sizing here?
Gonna bet again somewhere between the 2/3 and 3/4 pot size with an overpair on this board texture.
Maybe we do it this time. Okay, we made a half pot, so we're
getting closer.
We're getting
I'm glad
closer.
they picked this size because this gives us some extra stuff to talk about on the turn, assuming this gets called.
Well, that would be a really lame hand. How could the turn be an overcard if they just fold? I just make.
I mean, maybe if this gets raised, then we call.
You know, like Tactical Tuesday and just pretend that the turn was.
There's more ways to get to the turn than this bet getting called.
That's true. You could get raised. So cutoff calls. Turn is bum bum bum. The ace of hearts. So ace 8 for deuce with the ace 4 of hearts. Hero has red jacks. Please, for the love of God, I hope you check. Huh? We checked. And the villain checks behind. So anything you want to talk about on the turn?
I'm actually I was glad that our hero started off with a larger size flop c bet because I think that's going to change my turn strategy quite a bit. I don't know exactly how big of an effect sizing down to half pot does, but let's just assume that they, villain continues a similar range facing half pot that they do facing, the 2/3 size that I said that I would use on the flop. I think they have a significantly lower, smaller number of ace-x combinations in their range once they call a big bet on the flop, right? Sure. They're in the previous situation, you said they probably it wouldn't be crazy for them to float all of their ace-x on the flop. Here, that would be a little bit more unreasonable, right? I'm guessing that some hands ace 10 with no backdoor flush draw, ace jack suited, those types of hands are finding some folds on the flop. If they peel hands ace 6, ace 7, I'm sure those hands are doing a lot of folding as well if they don't have the backdoor flush draw. So I think in this spot, this is a spot where probably we have a slight ace-x advantage, given that I think part of my c-bet strategy for the big size would include ace-x with a backdoor flush draw. So I would bet a hand like ace-king of spades or ace-king of hearts or ace-king of diamonds for a big size on the flop as well. And that would sort of be the balancing side for my overpairs that are going to bet big. So I think they have less ace-x here than less ace-x and less of whatever overcard peels on the turn than they would in the spot where we c-bet a third. I mean, that's actually going to lead me to wanting to c-bet the turn for a small size again. So I think this is actually the spot where I would take the turn size that the Wolf and hand number 1 took and actually just bet a third on the turn and try to get called by, I think a region that's much more condensed to bluff catchers than weaker bluff catchers than ace-x than they were in the previous hand. So I think they're going to show up with way more 8x, pocket 9s, pocket 10s, pocket 7s, 6s, 5s, 4x. Now that they called a big bet on the flop instead of just a third. So much so that I feel more confident in my ability to place a profitable turn c bet for a third pot. And I think I would do that with that would be my only turn size is I would bet that 1/3 size with my ace-x and for bluffs it would just be the 2 overs that have now, for example, turned to flush draw. So a hand like king queen of hearts or queen jack of hearts or king 10 of hearts, something like that, jack 10 of hearts, 10 9 of hearts, etc., etc.
I really don't like it. I just think it's too thin. I think maybe if we bet 75% on the flop, then I would be more confident in seeing that as a possible delay.
Yeah. I was kind of going through the motions, assuming
half pot. I just think
I wanted to talk about the big size, but half pot.
Yeah. I really just hate betting the turn with jacks. So I'll be frank. I don't like it at all. I think it's just too hard to get called 3 streets. You're gonna bet a third on the turn, targeting hands that you could also just bet a third or half on the river and still target them for value once a turn checks through. So I think 9s or 10s or 8x isn't going to be playing for 3 streets. So you're not really getting any extra value by betting the turn. I'm not on board with betting the turn, but we didn't bet the turn.
Man. Don't you wish you bet the turn?
So the river's a jack of spades. We river a set. And now, we have some options, right? There's 87 in the pot. Villain has 188 behind. What do you think here? It's a really interesting river card, by the way.
So I would guess that a lot of the range that we are targeting with a big bet on the river likely bets themselves. I assume the largest part of their bluff catching range facing a big bet here is going to be some sort of ace X. Maybe they, it's not unreasonable for them to call flop with a hand like, ace queen of spades, ace queen of diamonds, something like that. Don't know exactly what their turn strategy is going to be. I guess it wouldn't be crazy for them to check back some of those hands. I mean, they could have some very obvious flop calls that have now turned top pair that probably won't bet the hand like ace three suited or ace five suited. So I think my strategy on the river would be to overbet or check.
So which one do you do with jacks?
Overbet.
Yeah, I would check. For all the things that you said, I think that like villain's ace, like when we jam, I think we're targeting ace X, and I think when we check, ace X bets themselves. And I would really like to have some value in my check raise all in range on the river. So like personally, this hand to me is just like slam dunk. Hands that we're targeting gonna bet themselves, so I'm just gonna check and let villain bet themselves. Side benefit is that like once we double check, villain could just bluff jam, right? They could have a hand like king queen that they just like 2x rip with.
Yeah, or like 5-6 or 6-7. Yeah,
6-6-7. Like
I think that's like for me that's like the biggest argument for checking is that they can find bluffs on the river with hands that can't call. I think for me the argument for overbetting is that when I overbet for value, I'm very often surprised by how deep down in the bluff catching range I find villains going sometimes where I'm like, wow, I did not expect 8-9 of diamonds to call 1.25x or 1.5x on the river, but hey, they found a call with 8x. So yeah, I think there's like I said, I think there's good arguments for checking, and I think there's good arguments for overbetting. And I would, I'm not married to one of those two options. I just generally trend the side of overbetting.
You make some good points. And if you'd like to hear more good points, I think you should click the subscribe button on YouTube. And if you have a strong preference for river action, you should leave a comment down below. But yeah, I think you make some good points. I still would rather check in this exact spot than... Yeah,
comment below why you think I'm right and why you think Brad's wrong. Why you should just overbet this river. Let him know.
Yeah. What did the Wolf do? They bet pot, which is the option that we didn't talk about, and probably not a great option. I think, again, should be overbetting or checking, I think. One benefit for pot is like those hands that you're targeting, like 8-9 of diamonds, maybe they call more at a higher frequency.
Yeah, you get to target a wider bluff catching range.
Yeah. So that could be the argument, although I would rather just rip than bet pot personally. But with that said, villain folds, and the hand that villain folded, I guess we'll never know. Don't have it. So let's just imagine they folded 8-9 of diamonds, and John's overbet all in strat would have ended terribly for him. But
they would have checked back 8-9 of diamonds. So
that's true. No. All right, good show. I don't think I have anything left to talk about.
Yeah, tough spot. Yeah. Hopefully we don't have any more of these. But if we do, see you next week.
Don't miss out on our next great poker adventure. Hit that subscribe button and join the CPG family.
This is Tactical Tuesday on Chasing Poker Greatness with your hosts, Brad Wilson and John Chai. Coach Brad approved. Are you a lone wolf searching for the ultimate pack? The CPG Wolf program is a close-knit brotherhood hell-bent on one thing only: chasing poker greatness. Powered by bleeding-edge wolf strats and led by Coach Brad and his lieutenants, CPG Wolves are systematically prepared for almost any spot they'll encounter on the green felt. If you want to plug into an elite team and have a step-by-step game plan to realize your full poker potential, you can apply at cpgwolves.com. Space is limited, and the pack is only as strong as its weakest member. So only the hungriest, grittiest, and most driven will be accepted into the program. Applications are open, at cpgwolves.com.